you're never alone. Reach out for help. I think that sometimes when we are in such pain, we feel like no one is going to understand our pain. And there's always somebody out there that has gone through something similar or going through something similar. And when we can share what we go through and allow people to help us through that situation and just share our vulnerability. See, I used to think that if I let my guard down and I shared how much I was struggling or any kind of vulnerability, that it meant that I was weak. But that vulnerability is actually your strength. And I think Brene Brown talks a lot about that. But I used to try to cover up all my scars. And whether you have scars on the outside or scars that are so far deep inside you, emotional scars, that's actually your gift.
Welcome to another episode of Negotiate Your Best Life. I am so excited to welcome my dear friend, Amberly Lago, to this episode. Boy, is she this is an incredible superstar here. Amberly is a bestselling author. She has a podcast. She has appeared on the Today Show, Megyn Kelly, The Doctor. She has a super popular TEDx talk. She has written a book called True Grit and Grace. She has a podcast of the same name that is incredibly popular. I think it's one of the top 1% of podcasts in the world or something like that. And so it is my honor and my pleasure to welcome my dear friend, Amberly. Thank you so much for being on my show.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for having me. We were talking before and I'm like, oh yeah, we were going to record a show. We can just talk. I mean, I just adore you. And it was so much fun to get to see you just crush it on stage at the $1 Million Mastermind this past weekend. Just so much fun to hang out. So, and to get to talk to you again, and then I'll get to see you again soon. So thank you for having me on the show.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for coming out to support me at Ryan Stewman's $1 Million Mastermind, which was an amazing, amazing experience to be there and hang out with you and Craig Siegel, who came out as well. And we had so much fun at dinner. We laughed our heads off till our sides split.
Yeah, my face was hurting. We were laughing so much.
So much fun. And well, I just have so much I want to talk to you about. And I mean, you have an unbelievable story. I mean, you were, so huge in the fitness world and model and doing incredible things until your world changed like in an instant. We talk about how life can change in an instant. Mm-hmm. Your life changed in an instant. And it's so, I think it can really be, the reason why I wanted to talk to you is because there's such a message for everyone in what you talk about and how what anyone can learn about how to come out of the dark. I mean, to me, that's really the power of your message on coming out of the dark.
Well, thank you. I mean, I hear you read my, introduction and I'm like, wow, it's so crazy. I never, ever would have thought, even like 5 years ago, that I would ever be doing a TED talk or have a book. Yeah, I didn't even own a computer.
I mean, there's so many people who follow me and listen to me who are in the dark, who feel like they're never going to get out of a hole. And you were deep in that hole. And so I want you to talk about how your life changed in 2010 and how that sent you into a hole. So talk about that.
Yeah. And, I was living the California dream, living not far from you with my 2 kids. My husband had a successful business, was sponsored by Nike. And everything changed in the blink of an eye. I mean, I was on my way home from work. I jumped on my Harley and I'm cruising down Ventura, and I see an SUV over in the corner. And, you know, as a motorcyclist, you kind of drive defensively and you try to make sure people see you. And I thought he saw me. I guess he didn't. He shot out of the parking lot. He T-boned me and I was thrown about 30 feet. And I'm sliding across the asphalt. And all I could think of, you know, Ventura is a really busy street. All I could think of is, please just don't let another car hit me. And when I came to a stop, I looked down at my leg, and it's crazy to look down at yourself and see yourself completely disfigured and deformed. I mean, my leg was broken into pieces. My foot was dangling on, held on by skin. My femoral artery was severed. I didn't know that at the time, but I had this like guardian angel, this guy, I don't know who he is to this day, but he right away took his belt off and made a tourniquet on my leg. He saved my life because I could have easily bled out. I was taken to the hospital, and I remember every detail. Like, people ask me, you know, well, did it hurt? Do you remember anything? It was the worst pain of my life, is the only way I can describe it. I've never felt anything like that before. And I remember just squeezing the paramedic's leg in the back of the ambulance and trying to make eye contact with him. And I was trying to get like, am I okay? Am I going to live? And I remember thinking, he's not making eye contact with me. Does this mean I'm going to die? Am I going to die? We get there. The emergency room is packed. It's full of cops. My husband was a lieutenant commander. News travels fast in the police force, and there were just cops everywhere. They thought maybe I was a cop that had gone down, and it was chaotic. I hear this crying. Like wailing. I look, it's my husband. Now I'm taped, like strapped down to this gurney, so I can't see what he sees, but I guess what he sees that is so horrendous, he was crying hysterically. And I yelled across the ER, honey, I need you to get over here and be strong for me. And I really needed to know at that moment, because I thought maybe this was it. I was going to die, that he was going to be able to take care of our two kids. Well, he came over and held my hand. And that's the last thing I remember before I was put in induced coma. And when I woke up a little over a week later, the first thing I learned was I had a 1% chance of saving my leg from amputation. They said, I'm sorry, this is basically a war wound. There's nothing we can do for you. We're going to have to amputate. And when I was saying earlier, you know, how I didn't even own a computer 5 years ago. I mean, I lived my whole life. I was a professional dancer. I was an athlete. I spent all my time on the gym floor. I didn't even have social media. I didn't know how to work technology. Running was my therapy. And so when they told me you've got a 1% chance of saving your leg, I was like, okay, well, then there's a chance. I need to find a doctor who's going to believe in that chance and help me save my leg. And that 1% was really, that was my glimmer of hope. And that is what I held on to. And I think that, you know, a lot of people, you know, I pray that, you know, no one has to ever experience being hit by a car. I pray no one ever has to experience being in a coma and waking up and not knowing what's going to happen next. I mean, I really don't recommend that. It's not fun, those tubes coming out of your mouth and everything. But, you know, I feel like so many of us have been hit so hard, especially in the last 2 years, whether it's with our health, our jobs, our mental health, especially. Whether it's pain, physically, emotionally, we've all been hit with something. Adversity is a given, but how we handle it is a choice. And I think that how I decided to handle it in the very beginning by focusing on that 1% and hanging on to that as my hope is how I made it through what totaled 34 surgeries to piece by piece put my leg back together. But then, Rebecca, the journey really began because I was diagnosed with complex regional pain syndrome, which is dubbed the suicide disease. And so I knew that I knew I was going to need grit, and I knew that I was going to have to be mentally tough and physically tough. But man, oh man, dealing with constant chronic pain on a daily basis and finding out that it's never going to ease up, that there's no known cure, That is really where my transformational journey began, and where I spiraled into a dark place and had to slowly learn how to crawl out of that space. And so, if I can share anything today for anybody who is struggling with whether it's depression, I'm not a doctor, but I've been depressed and I've climbed out of it. Anxiety, again, I'm not a specialist, but I've had anxiety. Fear, oh yeah. Shame, oh, I hated myself. I hated the way I looked. I was so embarrassed. I mean, to go from being the one who I was the breadwinner of the family. I was dependent on the way that I looked, and to go from being a fitness model to now being deformed and scarred up from the hip down and told to get back in a wheelchair, that I'd be permanently disabled, it really put me in a dark place. But by the grace of God, by developing some tools and some mental toughness, some grit, and really working on my optimism, I've been able to climb out of that. And that's what I'm so passionate about, is sharing some of the strategies and things that I've done to climb out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because I heard one of the things that you say, and as when I was listening back to some of your other interviews, where you said we can all decide if we're going to be the victim or the victor. And I've had that time in my life myself. And I talk about the deciding factor, and actually how the root of the word decide is actually side. It's actually to kill. It's like to cut off.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to decide at one point, like, what are you going to do?
I
Right?
love that. I love breaking down that word to really look at its true meaning. And yeah, I
When you
think from
decide, you're killing off any other possibilities.
mm-hmm.
Like, that's it, and the universe or God or, whatever it is that you believe in, I believe in God, you know, lines up for you to make it happen. Right? Are
Yeah.
you going to be the victim or the victor?
And I really did have to decide. And where I was stuck and how I was spiraling down is I was so caught up in trying to go back to what I was before the accident and fix what was broken. And I was also trying to just stuff down the pain. I mean, I grew up in Texas where we had sayings like, suck it up, buttercup. And suck it up only gets you so far. I had to learn to, being combined, I was stuck in a hospital bed for months. And when I say stuck in a hospital bed, I mean, I literally had bed sores because I couldn't move out of one position. I had to use a bedpan. And what I used to do for when I was sad or anxious or anything, I would go for a run. And now suddenly I was stuck in this hospital bed and I couldn't run. And I had to feel all these feelings that were and process them. And I had to, I kept saying to myself, like, how did this happen? What am I going to do? How am I going to get through this pain? And I realized I was asking myself the wrong question. And when I asked myself, why am I going to get through this? There was one morning I was laying in my hospital bed. I had a hospital bed that we put in our downstairs living room because my bedroom was upstairs and I couldn't go up and down the stairs. And I'm laying in bed and I was literally throwing up from pain in my little porta potty that was next to me, which wasn't easy. And I thought, how am I going to get through this day? And I heard this little voice. My daughter was 2 years old, and I heard her voice. I heard her say, Mama. And I knew right then it was like, it's like when we're in our head and we're saying how we're stuck in our head. And I had this inner critic, this bully that's saying, well, of course you can't do it. You'll never do it. You're not enough. You're not good enough, or whatever that inner bully says. But when I said why, and I gave myself a why, and it was because I wanted to be an example of resilience for my daughter. I didn't want to be an example of a victim for my daughter. So that why it activates the energy in you. It activates your heart and your human spirit. And I needed a lot of human spirit to get through the days ahead. But every time I focus on my why, to this day, it gets me out of my head and it puts me in my heart and it activates the human spirit. And man, the human spirit is powerful beyond measure.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember in your TED talk, you actually said, you, I wrote down this quote. You said, I didn't want to continue living, but I was too afraid to die. That's
Um,
powerful.
yeah, I that was at a time when I was finally able to walk again. I mean, I was walking with a limp, but it was about 2 years after recovering and being in and out of a wheelchair, up and off of crutches and surgery after surgery. And I was trying everything, Rebecca, for this nerve disease. I was on 73 homeopathic pills a day, 11 different prescription medications a day. I had tried ketamine infusions, Eastern, Western medicine, nothing was working. And I had started to drink every day. I mean, I was totally like went from being this healthy, vibrant person with a large, community, friends, family, to really in a place of darkness where my circle of friends I had shut out. I was trying to stuff down the pain and numb out the feelings and the pain with alcohol. And I was in this place where I was going, you know what? My daughters, they could find another mom. My husband, he could find another wife. Like they deserve better than this. And again, that was a moment where I got on my knees and I prayed. And there was that little bit of light left in me. And I think we all have that light within us, and we have to find ways to get it shining, to fan our flames, to whatever we can do. And I prayed to God and I said, help me. How am I going to get through this? Why do I need to get through it? Are you there? Can you help me? And I think it was by the grace of God that gave me the courage to reach out to somebody to ask for help and stop trying to do everything on my own and stop trying to numb out the feelings and embrace my circumstances so I could start to take steps to make my life better. And the thing that really changed my whole life really was my gratitude practice, first of all, has pulled me out of a lot of darkness because it really shifts my perspective. And it's something I still do to this day. But it was also the power of prayer and asking God, believing in something bigger than me, that I didn't have to carry all this, that I could rely on a power greater than me, whether you say God, universe, spirit, whatever, I say God. And then asking for help from friends, family, saying, hey, look, I'm not okay. I need help over here. And that really allowed me to make some meaningful connections and get the help that I need. And now it allows me to do the same for others.
Yeah, you talked about pacer. I was going to ask you about that. Pacer? You were like talking about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I actually came up with that one night because I was sitting at the dinner table with my husband and he was looking at me and I guess I looked pretty tired. He was like, you really need to pace yourself. And I don't know what it is, but when somebody tells me to calm down or to pace myself, I'm just like, really? I am pacing myself. Don't
Yeah.
you see what I'm doing over here? But it really was inspired, that whole pacer method. It really forced me to take a look within, take a look at what I was doing, um, to get through all the challenges that I faced every day, to get through what I was dealing with emotionally and physically, what it was I was doing to get through, instead of, being that victim, what I was doing to be the victor of my life. And I just grabbed a dinner napkin. I started writing down everything on a dinner napkin. And I came up with an acronym for PACER. Well, it was just going to be PACE, but I realized that I needed to be a pacer through life. And I had to add that last R on there. So PACER stands for perspective, acceptance, community, endurance, and rest. And perspective is everything. I mean, we have the ability to shift our perspective, and it can switch our day. It can change our life. And the quickest and easiest way to do that is to get grateful. And I know you hear a lot of people say, oh, practice gratitude, get grateful. But I really could feel and see how it changed my life one night when I was sitting in the hospital bed. I was all alone. This was back when I'm in the hospital. And I started feeling myself spiral down into that overwhelm and then just depression, because I was watching some infomercial and there were these, beautiful girls running on the beach in their bikinis. And I started going, that my mind and the soundtrack going on in my head, and the inner critic was saying, what if you never run on the beach? What if your husband never likes you or is attracted to you? What if you never wear a bikini? What if you can't chase after your kids? What if they amputate your leg tomorrow? What if you die tomorrow? Like it was going on into a spiral of pity party. And I said, I've got a choice here. I can go down this road of despair, or I can choose to focus on what I can control right now. And I grabbed this gratitude journal. I started writing down everything that I was grateful for, the nurses that were taking care of me, along with their names, the people who had brought me food and flowers, that I was still alive, that I could breathe, that I had a view outside. I couldn't go outside yet, but I could get out. I could see the sun, and I had a vision for going out there again soon. And so I saw how, instead of laying there looking down at my leg, I was really starting to focus on all the good in my life. And when you focus on the good just keeps getting better. And I will tell you that this is something that I still practice every day. I start my day with gratitude, and I have a God squad. It's a group of women, and we text each other 10 things we're grateful for every morning. And then I end my day with my daughter, and I cuddle up in bed, and I'm like, what's one good thing that happened to you today? And what is one thing that you're grateful for? And it really led me into acceptance, which is the second part of Pacer. And acceptance was really hard for me. I mean, I was in denial. I didn't want anybody to know I was in pain. I didn't want anybody to know that I had a nerve disease. Then when I started drinking every day, and I really had to accept that I had a problem with drinking. And it wasn't until I took radical acceptance and radical accountability and had radical awareness about what I was doing in my life that I could actually start to make the changes. And so I think any transformation really starts with acceptance, any recovery. And that goes for your health, it goes for your marriage, it goes for your business. Like, what are the things that you are doing that are moving you closer to your goals, or maybe moving you further away? And so that was a big part of my healing journey. And it really connected me with community, which is, I think, maybe the most powerful part of Pacer. Community is everything. It's how I stay sober. It is what moves the needle on my business. It's community is what allows me to have belly laughs and good times and spark joy. It allows me to, we can lean on each other when the going gets tough. Community is like when you go and you show up at an event for your friend, and I get to see you rocking it on stage in your patent leather skirt. Like, community is just, it's been what it has allowed me to conquer some fears. I just texted a friend of mine today, and I was like, hey, I'm thinking about you. She's like, hey, what's the latest and greatest? And I'm like, actually, I'm kind of trying to get my act together for this big event that I have coming up. And she goes, you already have your act together. Get out of your head. Like, little reminders like that. It's like, that's why we have community, so we can remind each other, so we know we don't have to do it alone. Because, man, being an entrepreneur or a mom, or, if you are in a corporation, or you're, doing a podcast, whatever it may be, it takes endurance. And that's the next part of Pacer. And endurance, I think, is where grit comes into play. And I think that, endurance takes grit. I think, the formula for grit, it's inspired by your vision and your purpose. It is fueled by your passion and your beliefs, and it's powered by your faith and your hope, and it is revived by resilience, and it's driven by love. And I think that it takes a little bit of fear of failure for me and a little bit of proving people wrong, because I've been told my whole life I would never succeed, or I'd never amount to anything, or I would be stuck in a wheelchair forever. Nothing wrong with wheelchairs. My brother's been in a wheelchair his whole life, but that just wasn't the vision for me. So I think for endurance, it takes that grit. It's not necessarily about enduring the pain, but it is about building your stamina so you can sustain whatever it is that you're going for. And so if we really keep our eye on our vision and focus on what we need and what our needs are, and that leads me into the last part of Pacer, which is rest. And speaking of what your needs are, rest. I didn't want to add this one on to Pacer. It's the hardest. It was the hardest thing for me. It's getting easier now because I have made rest a part of my business strategy. And when I could redefine it in that way, I could go, oh, okay, resting doesn't mean I'm quitting, or resting doesn't mean that I'm just not strong enough, or whatever that resting I used to tell myself it meant. And growing up an athlete, it was like, there's no time to rest. You just keep going. In the entrepreneurial journey, it's like, it's all about the hustle and grind. And I'm like, no, it is about recovery and refueling yourself so you can show up, so you can go and spark creativity, so you can go and gather wisdom and come back and share that with your tribe. So I've taken rest to a whole nother level. I even wear like this ring that monitors how much sleep and the kind of sleep I get. And so that Pacer is something that I use every day. When I start to forget and I get in my head and I'm feeling anxious, I'm like, Pacer, what am I leaving out? Okay, community, I need to reach out to someone. Or how did I not get enough rest? Do I need to shift my perspective about this? And so I hope that it's like really my sincere wish that the next time um, anyone who's listening is struggling, whether it's pain, whether it's anxiety or fear, if you just remember Pacer, to get you through that moment and to really check in with yourself so you can have the life that you've always imagined, even when things don't go as planned.
I love that so much. I mean, and I love the simplicity of it. And especially because in some ways it's like pacing through the pain too, because sometimes, I think people just want to go, I just want it done with, I just want it over, or I should be able to get out of this, or I should be able to be done with this, or I should, I had, I love the expression, you should all over yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like, but sometimes you just have to pace through it. Sometimes you just like the only way out is through. And so I think it's an amazing thing that you came up with.
Well, thank you. It's really so simple, and it's just something that I use. And actually I had never shared that with anyone. And then when they called me to do a TED Talk, and it was for a big one, it was one of the most prestigious TED Talks. It's Berkeley, and it was their 10-year anniversary. So it was a big deal.
Which you crushed it, by the way. Everybody needs to go watch it on YouTube.
Thank you. I was like, oh my goodness, it was one of it was my very first talk on a big stage like that. And I was so
amazing.
Well, you know what? Thank you. They tell you, what is the most important lesson that you've learned that you can share? And they said, don't talk about God and don't talk about your accident too much. And I'm like, well, God is the most important thing. Uh, and then this accident was the biggest life-changing thing for me. So I'm like, okay, how am I going to do this? But anyway, I thought about, this is something that I use every day that has changed my life. And I remember sometimes I think that we're given situations or circumstances to kind of test how much we believe in our message. And right before I was doing the talk, I was sick. I had lost my voice. My daughter was sick and she was throwing up. And so I was going back downstairs to hold like a throw up bucket for her. And I threw out my back holding the bucket. And I run upstairs and I'm on the floor and I'm supposed to be at Berkeley in 3 days. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, she's sick. She's throwing up. I haven't started throwing up yet. What if I'm not well? What if I can't even walk out on stage? That what if, what if, what if? And my friend texted me and said, how's it going? I said, it's horrible. I don't even know if I'm going to make it. It's crazy. And I was freaking out, filled with anxiety. And she texted me back one word, pacer. And I was like, oh, yes. How can I be in acceptance? Like, how can I shift my perspective? How can I be in acceptance for what is going on right now, what I can control? Like, there's no sense in freaking out. It is what it is. How can I just take care of myself in the moment? And I needed more rest. Like, it was just so simple. But sometimes I think when we're going through a difficult situation, that we need to get back to basics, like really get back to basics. And when I say that, I mean, are you getting enough rest? Did you eat? Did you move your body? Did you forget to exercise? Did you forget to pray? Did you count your blessings that day and get grateful? Like, it's so simple, but I really practice these basic necessities that I need to just feel good in the world. And sometimes I start to skip on those things. And that's when I notice that my anxiety starts to creep up, or I start getting down on myself a little bit. And so there are non-negotiable things like praying, my gratitude list, time to myself to have that quiet time of reflection and journaling in the morning. So I wake up before everybody else wakes up, and then moving my body, because I really need that. I had when I had postpartum depression, after both my girls were born, my husband was like, you need to go to a shrink because our marriage is not going to last with you like this. Cause I mean, I was depressed. I was really depressed. And I went to, I went to a doctor, a psychologist, and she's like, yeah, uh, you might need to be medicated. And I said, well, I know if I can I'd had a cesarean. I said, I know if I can just get back to exercising and running again, I'll feel okay. And she said, well, if you need to work out to feel good, then something's definitely wrong with you and you need to be medicated. And I left there in tears and I was like, screw you. I'm just going to go for a run, or I'm going to do what I can. That's back when I could run. Now, although I can't run the way that I used to, I have figured out other ways to move my body. And in fact, even when I was stuck in the hospital bed, I knew if I could just move however I could, that it would help me mentally. And so I had a pull-up bar installed over my hospital bed, and I had some light dumbbells. One of the trainers from the gym brought me, and they weren't heavy. It wasn't like I was doing anything crazy, but it just made me feel like I was moving in the right direction, and it releases those endorphins that make you feel good. And so moving your body really does move your mood.
Absolutely. Oh, well, this has been so, so, so amazing. So what is like the one thing that you would want everybody to know, like who's like sitting in like the darkest place right now? Like, what is like the one thing that you would definitely say, do, um, or the one last pearl of wisdom that you would want to share with them?
I would say, I mean, when I say I've been in that place, that dark place where I really didn't know how I was going to get out of it, didn't want to live. Um, that you're never alone to reach out for help. I think that sometimes when we are in such pain, and that's emotional pain, mental pain, or we're dealing with a lot of sadness or grief or physical pain, or all of it wrapped all together, we feel like no one is going to understand our pain. And there's always somebody out there that has gone through something similar or going through something similar. And when we can share what we go through and allow people to help us through that situation, we and just share our vulnerability. See, I used to think that if I let my guard down and I shared how like much I was struggling or any kind of vulnerability, that it meant that I was weak. But that vulnerability is actually your strength. And I think Brene Brown talks a lot about that. But I used to try to cover up all my scars. And whether you have scars on the outside or scars that are so far deep inside you, emotional scars, um, that's actually your gift. That is actually, and sometimes we might think, oh, but I have all these obstacles that are getting in the way. And those obstacles are the way. I used to look at my leg as disgusting and ugly and deformed. And now I look at my leg as, wow, these are the battles that I have won. It gives me strength. Wow, look at how my leg holds me up and how the body can heal. And so I think the most important thing is to never do it alone, ask for help, whether that's a doctor, a therapist, a friend, a stranger on Instagram who is dealing with something similar to you. I have met so many people on Instagram that have the same nerve disease that I have, or they're going through a similar situation. Or there was a friend of mine I've met. Her name's Erica. Her leg looks almost identical to mine. She
Oh
was
my
in a
God.
motorcycle accident and we
That's
met online.
amazing.
So
That's
when you start
amazing.
to just reach out, know that you're not alone. Um, and then really ask yourself, what is your vision? And what are your beliefs? And what are your needs? And what are your gifts? And what is your why? And go into your heart. And that's where you're going to find your hope and your energy.
Mm,
And pray. Man, there's
beautiful.
power in prayer.
Oh, so much so. And gratitude. Yeah. So where can people find out more about you, find your book, all that good stuff? Your
Yeah,
your
well,
po- your
if
podcast?
yeah, well, you're going to be on the. Well, we've already recorded your episode. It's about to be released. I cannot wait for my audience to hear you and how you slay the narcissist. I love it. But yeah, you can actually text me GRIT to 818-214-7378 if you want that download of the Pacer. It's a free playbook that you can actually take that method and apply it into your life. And then you can go to amberlylago.com and you can find everything on Instagram is kind of where I hang out the most, at Amberly Lago Motivation. And I have links to my book. You can get it on Amazon or check out Rebecca's interview on True Grit and Grace. And you can find that on any podcast platform.
Yeah, absolutely. Go follow her on Instagram, go get her book, text her, follow her, check her out. She's
Oh,
amazing. And Amberly, thank you so much. You are incredible. And I am so blessed to be your friend and be in your presence. You are a light for the world. Thank you so much.
thank you.